I wanted just a short opportunity to talk a little bit about the Tephra database for a couple of reasons. One, to give a progress report on what we're doing and how far along we are, but also just to kind of give you an idea of what we're collecting in Alaska and why we're collecting it. I get a lot of requests on a weekly basis, and I just wanted to give people a better perspective on why we do what we do, and so that you understand either why we are slow to respond or don't collaborate with certain people and do collaborate with others, just really to open up the doors and let you have a better idea. I feel like this curtain is in the way. Okay, so want to talk a little bit about what the Alaska Tephra Lab is, what our goals and priorities are. I probably won't talk so much about our functions and technical capabilities. That's not really that important. I sort of talked about that the other day. Future developments and then collaboration opportunities. Okay, so the Alaska Tephra Lab is something that we started from scratch about 10 or 11 years ago. Certainly people have been studying tephras in Alaska for some time. The observatory has only been around since 88, 89, right before the Redoubt eruption, where the plane flew through the ash cloud. And so it wasn't really until the observatory came around that people started really focusing on doing some Tephra studies. But when I came into the story, there wasn't a lab. There was just sort of individuals who were working on things. They were on their way out the door, retiring, and so we realized, because in Alaska, volcanic ash is our principal hazard, we really needed to do something. So we started this lab. It's an interdisciplinary center for the study of volcanic ash erupted from Alaskan volcanoes, and I really don't go other places. I did once get the opportunity to go to Hawaii because there was an explosive eruption there, but that was just a really amazing opportunity. But in general, I only do work in Alaska. I'm really the principal investigator on Tephra studies in Alaska at the USGS, or for the Volcano Observatory, certainly not in Alaska, but just for the USGS ABO. And the lab itself, I say, serves as a regional facility for the storage and management of Tephra data for us as well as our collaborators. So our major priorities, we're a hazards-based mission. So my focus is on these three things: on modern eruptions. So when something happens, we switch hats. If something's erupting, we immediately have to focus on that. And so I have a number of objectives, including characterizing the Tephra deposits, fallout deposits, calculating mass, volume, creating distribution maps. So there's an important research focus during eruptions, but I also have a lot of other responsibilities during eruptions to deal with most important impacts and interagency coordination. During all other times when things aren't erupting, and in Alaska things are erupting often, so I just want to point that out because we have distractions. We're often distracted at an observatory. We're not just a research facility. So because I'm the main person working on Tephras, keeping in mind that I'm also doing a lot of other things, and if I'm not getting back to you, that's why. So the other things that we're working on throughout the year include, and I kind of put them in this order, reference studies from very high threat volcanoes. So all of the volcanoes in the country have been categorized in terms of threat level. And that has to do with proximity to population, infrastructure, things like that. And so our money goes towards those volcanoes. And they may seem random to some people. So if we'll look at a map in a little bit, and there's many, many places that we've never even set foot on. So we certainly haven't been everywhere. And secondarily, we work on caldera-forming eruptions. So those are the big marker beds, and we're focused on those because we want to know when we go into the field, what do we expect to see? So we're using them in the same way. What are the isochrons? But they're not our top priority unless they fall into a very high threat volcano category, and not all of them do. Because they're just not located near infrastructure, or they haven't had a recent eruption or a recent enough eruption. And then finally, regional studies. These are I call them regional unknown studies. This is the category that most connects the observatory to people like you who are interested in correlating their tephras to reference materials in Alaska. And so often I can't say no because there's wonderful collaboration opportunities, but this is probably the one category where I have to kind of say no because we haven't been to very many of our volcanoes, so it's almost impossible to work on a regional study where I have nothing to compare it to. And so often I'll sit down with people and we'll talk about, well, what are your goals in a regional study? Do you really want to link it back to a volcano? Well, we can only do that if we've been to those volcanoes. But if your questions are things like correlating from site to site, okay, that's different. We can help with that if it fits into the mission. So here's a map of Alaska or the Aleutian Arc. So I've just highlighted some of the areas and the volcanoes that we focused on. So you can see, I mean, there's over 100 volcanoes. And certainly many of them we haven't done any Tephra work at. A number of other studies have gone on there. Everything that we do in Alaska is helicopter-based. There isn't a single volcano you can get to via the road system. So logistics are expensive. So getting out to a field area is difficult and often may include just the opportunity to hop in with the geophysics crew when we're installing a seismic network. And that might mean we have a week, a couple of days, whatever. And so a lot of our research is based on just opportunistic research with, like I said, jumping in with the seismic crew. So just wanted to point out the places that we have been and also point out the places we haven't been. So when we have people who are working on marine cores over here, it's just, I mean, it's sort of embarrassed. I've always been I feel like we're so far behind. We just have a lot of work to do in a big field area. So it's exciting, but at the same time, I always feel like I need to apologize for not knowing more about our volcanoes and not being able to really collaborate on some of these marine cores and places that are more remote to us or just places that we haven't done work. So in some ways, it seems kind of confusing why certain volcanoes we've done a lot of work on, and why these big gaps. Well, if they're not listed as a very high threat volcano, then we can't put our money towards it. So for example, Akutan and Mukushin out here seem like, what's the big deal? They're kind of far away. Who cares about them? Well, they're located near the largest seafood processing plant and the largest fishing industry in all of North America, and so that's where that comes in, although we don't expect them to have huge eruptions. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our Tephra database. So I've been working on this for about 10 years. When I first came into the survey, I knew that Tephra was a big deal. I knew it was important. It wasn't just, I didn't want to propagate the way a lot of Tephra work had been done in Alaska, which is to project-based. You go to a place, you do your project, you put everything in a box, and you shove it in the warehouse and kind of forget about it, and not really archive things. I knew that Tephra was important. I knew that it's very interdisciplinary, that people all over the world are interested in this, and so I felt obligated to think about this in the big picture and the long term. And so that's part of the vision of the lab, is to archive samples, use standards for collection and analysis, characterization. So I sat down with our database and web people. I don't really have the right brain to do this. I wish I did. I've purchased many, many books, and I just can't do it. I just can't manage to grow that extra arm and learn how to do databases on my own. And so we have a really wonderful group of people at the State Geological Survey in Fairbanks who are responsible for our website, our wonderful website. And that is a database back-end website. And so about 10, 11 years ago, I sat down with them and said, this is what I want. And it was all in Excel spreadsheets. And here's the data that I need to collect and keep and maintain for a long time. And I want everyone to know what it is so that if I were to croak tomorrow, it would be intuitive to find all this information. So they immediately said, okay, this is way bigger than anything we have or have ever done or AVO has. So no, we're not going to do this all at once, but we will build it in modules. And AVO is not just about Tephra, it's about all the other research that's going on there. So together we sat down and started building tables and building sort of the metadata standards so that the information that I have been collecting through time is consistent with the way the database has been designed. And so some people are familiar with the website, can go on there and see that, we started with a reference database, and then we have a field database. So all of our geologists have a requirement to submit samples, put them into our database, and that's just sort of one module. So module by module, we've been building this, and it wasn't until this year that we're to the point now that AVO has focused and calls the Tephra database a top priority. So we're not there yet. I don't really have much to show in terms of an online database, but what we're building is a relational MySQL database that will be served via web forms. The goal of the database really is to help me do my job and to make it more efficient so that I'm not sitting and working in Excel. I need to be able to query things. So if it weren't for all of the interest from the rest of the world, from people like you, I would really only be designing this to help me get my job done. But because I know how important it is, we're trying to build something that is also going to be useful to everyone. So initially it may be just internal until we get all the bugs worked out, and the ultimate goal is for it to be public so that people can go online and find information about tephras in Alaska, which also makes my job a little bit more efficient because maybe I'll have some fewer number of emails. So anyway, I just wanted to list a few of the categories of data. In fact, maybe we don't even need to talk about this because we've got a lot of time later on today, but there's a lot of tables. Anthony showed however many tables there and said that that was just a basic AVO. It's called GeoDiva, our database, AVO's database. That's not just Tephra, it's called GeoDiva, and so the Tephra database is a subset of that. But the Tephra data is so detailed. I mean, there's absolutely everything that you can possibly imagine, and just like Anthony mentioned, we've built into it a lot of information that we may or may not ever put in there, but if we don't have the ability to put in the data, then we can't go back and fix it later. And so we'll make the web forms such that they're simple for people to fill out, but at the same time, there's always the ability to put in a bunch of metadata that you might be interested in. Yeah, I don't think I need to go over all these. These are pretty intuitive. These are the things we've been talking about the last couple of days. And again, I agree with what Britta said about the similarity coefficient. That's what I use it all the time, not necessarily to say the sample matches this sample, but I have to start from somewhere. And when you have 3,000, 4,000 samples, it's the easiest way to reduce the number of data sets to even think about. And then you start to do the multi-parameter correlations. So yeah, I use this a lot, and so we're definitely going to have this built in. In fact, we already have it built in. Seth Snedeker, the person who's building the database, showed me some examples, and it looks really cool. But it just makes things go a lot faster. So just emphasizing that we're building this in phases. It may start out to be an internal use only tool, really to increase our efficiency, which will also increase my efficiency in getting information to you guys. And I realize the most important thing that I can do for this community is to get this stuff into this database so that it's more accessible to you. So that's kind of my big goal. So I just wanted to show a couple of examples of things that we already use at AVO, and they're just going to be linked to our to the Tephra database. So this is an example of our field information. So all of us do this, and this is something that is queryable to the public right now. And if things are published, that's when the public can see it. Until it's published, then you just can do a query, and it will tell you nothing's there, or how many samples are there with information. And so this is just an example of a download of information. I think I did a search just on all Augustine data. And there's pages and pages of information here, and you can query by whatever you'd like. They also already built the geochemical database. So really building the Tephra database is mostly just the physical characteristics and publication information, all these other things that just wasn't part of the other database. But we're far along, we're getting there, and I don't know how people will know that it's there, but if you're familiar with the AVO database, and I see that Anthony had it listed as one of the links on his, it'll be fairly intuitive when you start to have this information. So that's all I wanted to cover. Yeah.